Welcome to the Iowa blog and back here in the library studio. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We have been continuing a series called Return to the Garden. It is among the most important stories that I could possibly share with you. It goes back to a realization that the garden experience was almost 180 degrees different than it has been perceived all of these years, and that our path towards God and his interactions with us are also 180 degrees different than what the religious have proposed. The story, before I continue, and we're now in Isaiah, as he is describing the process of us returning to the garden, is that when you look at the garden experience, there was no Eve. There was no discernible fruit. There were two trees that heretofore no one had properly identified, but we have. We have man being taken from all of the other animals that existed on earth and being given one unique difference, one added attribute that made this man potentially better than any other animal in terms of being a potential for companion with God. And that is that Adam was given a nasama, a conscience, in addition to what all other animals have as a consciousness, which is our nephesh soul. So a nasama in a difference to a nephesh soul. And then with that addition, then we were a less robust, smaller dimensionally version of God, man was. That's the image there, that with a nasama, with a conscience, then we were in the image of God. It's very much like a blueprint is to a building. The blueprint is in two dimensions. The building is actually infinitely larger than the blueprint because it's in three dimensions. But in God's case, we're three-dimensional and he's seven-dimensional. So it's that infinite increase times an infinite increase times an infinite increase times an infinite increase, or an infinity to the fourth power, to go from the third to the seventh dimension. So this is already a different rendering of what you've heard than what has been presented previously. The single most important aspect of all of this is the proper understanding of what Gan represents. It's Gan Eden. Gan is a sheltered, covered, protected, concealed environment that is conducive to life, sheltered, protected environment that is conducive to life. This makes Gan Eden, the garden of great joy, a microcosm of our planet, of Earth. You see, Earth is unique in all of the known universe. Our galaxy is unique. It's in the center of a huge bubble, unaffected by all of the chaos that is happening in other galaxies, 2 trillion of them all around us. And we're in the perfect place in our galaxy to have access to the heavy elements so that mankind can be created from the dust of the earth, at least our bodies. Perfect environment to minimize constant bombardment of cosmic rays and of neutron stars and supernova and all of that, and yet not so far enough, so far out that there hasn't been the explosion of first generation stars providing the heavy elements that are necessary, not only for our planet, but for life itself. And protected from all of the bombardment of other galaxies because of this bubble that we happen to be in. And then you look at the Earth itself with its moon and its star and its orbit, and it's the perfect star for life. Not a a red dwarf, as are so many stars as you move further out in galaxies that are too unpredictable, too unreliable. It is not such a massive star that it's would be way too short-lived for life to develop on our planet. It's the perfect size star, perfect demeanor of a star. And the Earth happens to be the perfect distance from that star. You see what happens with Venus, just a wee bit closer, and Mars just a wee bit further out. But it is also our molten core that spins, creating a magnetic field that is so essential to life on this planet. And you know, Mars doesn't have one. Maybe it had one long ago, but it doesn't have one anymore. And without it, there is no protection for cosmic rays, and life cannot develop. You have to have enormous amounts of water, and again, in this Goldilocks zone where water can be liquid on the surface, and that is very precisely tuned. And you have to have a moon abnormally large that creates tides. Otherwise, life is impossible. You have to have tectonic plates that move the crust for life to be possible. You have to have a giant planet that's a gaseous giant that is the perfect distance, actually outside of the orbit of the planet, for it to absorb the shock of all of the crashing meteors and comets that would otherwise destroy life on the planet, like when this planet was hit 60 million years ago to end the reign of the dinosaurs. It's just one checklist after another that makes the planet just so extraordinarily rare that it is a sheltered and protective garden that is conducive to life. Eden is the microcosm of it. The other thing that's interesting in this regard is the correlation between Eden and Gan Eden. Gan from Ghana, meaning sheltered and enclosed, protective place for a garden, and Sukkah, which is from Sakak, which has the exact same definition, to be sheltered, protected, covered. So what we're actually doing with God's plan, as it's laid out in the Torah, is we're going from the garden back to the garden over 6,000 years. So we end up in the garden over the 7,000th year. And that's exactly where we are. We are just 7.5 years now away from our beginning of the 7th millennium of man. And it is on Sukkah that we will return to the garden. So why were we kicked out of the garden? Why 6 steps? Why 6,000 years in between? And why are we being invited back to the garden? That is something that I'm positive that no one else has ever shared with you before. And the reason is that in the garden, man was a flop. We failed not because of sin. There was no original sin. That's Roman Catholic malarkey. We failed in the garden because we didn't do any of the things that Yahweh needed us to do for us to be able to be allowed out of the garden in a manner that God could actually take us off of this planet and go explore the universe, which was his intent. You see, this universe that we're in is so enormous that mankind, after all of this time, has only managed to go to our moon. And only that, 6 or 7 times, and the longest being less than a week. And the fact that we're pretending to go back is only because, just like the last time, we had a reason we wanted to beat the Soviets. This time we want to beat the Chinese, but no one's going to live on the moon. It's way too toxic. And the moon is 3 days distant at our present traveling speeds. And Mars, even at the best point where our orbits get sort of aligned, which happens every 24 months, 22 months, I think is the period, almost 2 years, is that at that point, it's 6 to 9 months en route. But the travel time, the distances, well, hugely disparate. The fact is, no one is ever going to go to Mars to live. Elon Musk is just flat out wrong. And I'm sure he knows it, but he doesn't want to admit it, because then what else does he do with SpaceX? What does he do with his money? What does he do with his life? But no one's going to Mars to live. We may one time send people to Mars to die, but they're not going to live there. This, and beyond that, there is a 0% chance that human beings will ever even travel there. That's how great the distances are. Now, if we were to try to travel to the nearest star, which is a lousy triplet of red dwarfs, it would take 70,000 years to get there. 70,000 years. And after a matter of 1 year, the human being wouldn't survive. Our bodies would deteriorate to the point that it wouldn't be possible. We can't survive 1 year, much 70,000 years. It's one of the reasons why Mars isn't doable. You can't get away from Earth's gravity for more than a year and expect to survive it. So this planet is unique. And we know we have a universe of 2 trillion stars, none of which we can reach. And not 2 trillion stars, 2 trillion galaxies, each with a few 100 billion stars, each with hundreds of planets and moons. We can't get there to any of them. But God created it. And he wants us to see it. He wants to share it. What good is something that magnificent if you don't have someone to share it with? So now back to the garden. What did Yahweh want from Adam, from this man, that he gave a conscience so he could be smarter than any of the animals that could actually think? And the first thing he said of man, he wanted man to work, to engage, to do something, to make a contribution. He's not looking for a dependent. Adam was a dependent. He didn't contribute anything. Men have heretofore, you could count on 2 hands, maybe 2 feet and 2 hands, if you count fingers and toes, of the people who have actually productively engaged with Yahweh over these past 6,000 years. And only 2 or 3 of them are really notable, maybe a handful that are really notable, that have made a tremendous contribution. The first who listened and did what God said is Noah. The next is Moshe. After that, you get to David. Not a lot of people. Brief periods here and there, but to see it all the way through and make a major contribution is very few examples. So the first thing God wanted is somebody to work with him, to engage with him. God values work. He's always wanting to engage and to make a contribution to make things better. And mankind has not been good in that regard. We've been horrible. The second thing he asked of man is you be observant, shamar. I want you to pay attention. God doesn't want someone who he can take to explore the universe, and that travel companion has to be observant, somebody who closely examines and carefully considers and enjoys that process. Otherwise, we're lousy travel companions. You want to do a show and tell, you want the person you're doing the show and tell to see and think, right? Well, that's what shamar means, and Adam flunked shamar. Then God gave Adam instructions, and there's no indication that he listened or responded appropriately to them. God needs that. And when given the chance and he made a mistake, God had a remedy for it, just stop doing that. But he doubled and tripled and quadrupled down and continued to wallow in what God had asked him not to do. So Adam proved to be completely untrustworthy. And then when God asked man, why did you do that? Rather than take responsibility and say, listen, I made a mistake. Let's reset this. I should have responded differently. It's my bad. I'd like to make this a learning experience. No, he blamed God and then blamed the woman. He didn't take responsibility. The woman was even worse. So mankind just failed. It wasn't a sin of commission, as in first sin. It was a failure by omission. We just were lousy at the four things God wanted. He wants somebody that when they stumble and fall and make a mistake knows how to get back up, how to correct the mistake, how to own the mistake and grow from it. And somebody who is devoted, dedicated. And God's a hard worker. So you really have to make a contribution if you want to get his attention. And so we have to prove ourselves worthy. Adam did not. And so God is the one who went and told us that it's not good for man to be alone. And what I've shared here is you don't understand what he was saying if you think that, well, then he needs a woman and man should be with a woman. That's not what God was saying. What God was saying is, I'm leaving you. You have, in this sheltered environment, you have a 0% chance of ever maturing and developing each of those four skill sets that I'm looking for. You're not observant. You're not active and making a contribution. You're a lousy listener. And when you make a mistake, you wallow in it. You're not reliable. You're not dependable. You're 0 for 4. And nothing's going to get better if I continue to have you in this sheltered garden. You're going to have to skin some knees and fall and get back up for you to be worth my attention. So God abandoned Adam. The fall of man was created before Chawa, the woman, was even conceived. So you can't blame the woman, as is the case in Islam, and a lot of Christian cults like to blame the mythical Eve. No one named Eve was in the garden. It was Chawa. Chawa actually means to state your mind. But God calls the fall of man before woman was even created. And woman was created in man's image for the express purpose of being of benefit to man, so that collectively men and women could earn Yahweh's respect and trust. No, you've never heard any of that before, but that's the story. And the central figures in that story are actually the trees. And the trees are not plants. They're people. The tree of lives is the greater luminary of Genesis 1. The tree of knowledge is the lesser luminary of Genesis 1. These are the two men who on the fourth day make a contribution to this restoration of the relationship by fulfilling the Moedim. What God says. They're signs relative to the Moedim, and that the lesser luminary reflects the greater luminary's light. Just as the tree of knowledge explains who the tree of lives is and how you benefit from it. We're later told by the prophet Isaiah, whose testimony we're considering now in the 11th chapter in Yeshaya, Isaiah, that the tree of knowledge, the Etz Diath, is the Choder. One of the most important prophecies ever uttered, because he's the only person in human history that is given the seven spirits of Yahweh. One of them is Etzah, which is to be this tree who can present the entire picture that God has painted and provided for us from beginning to end. And of Diath, which is knowledge, vast reservoir of knowledge. There's 35 of these. This is the living manifestation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in our world today. And the greatest discovery that tree of knowledge made as the Choder with the seven spirits of Yahweh is the Dode is the Messiah, the chosen one, the Son of God, the former and returning King, who as our Savior fulfilled Pesach, Matzah and Bikurim in 33C, as he himself told, giving us the exact dates that he would do it in year 4000 Yah, and that he is the only eyewitness who wrote about it and told us exactly how the Romans would crucify him, which means the crucifixion victim is Dode David, not the mythical Jesus who was created in 52 CE by Paul as a crude counterfeit. It's the greatest discovery in human history pursuant to developing a relationship with God, to being able to earn God's trust and to leave this planet in his company. These are all insights that from the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and then into Genesis 3 that I was able to deduce for you and share with you. But it doesn't end there, even though that would be magnificent. But now that we know why God caused the fall of man and ended the experiment in Gan Eden as this microcosm for the planet Earth, is that we didn't pass muster. We weren't interesting. We were not trustworthy. We were not engaged. We were not contributors. We were dependents, expecting entitlements. That didn't work. That's not what God's looking for. You see, if God takes us off of this planet, we call Earth, and he then enables us to travel as light energy, he has to increase our power and our capability by, at the very least, by the square of the speed of light, for us to shed our material bodies and to have our souls enveloped in light energy. And that is the only way that we can leave this planet and actually explore our galaxy, much less all of the other 2 trillion galaxies out there and the billions of solar systems within each of those. And for us to learn what we are now referring to as dark energy and dark matter, come to understand what they are, experience them, witness them, and then go internally at the same magnitude to appreciate quarks and leptons and protons and neutrons and electrons, and so that we understand how atoms are comprised and how molecules are comprised and the energy that holds them together, and how, in fact, energy and matter are the same thing, just different amounts of the same thing, E equals mc squared. For God to allow us to be emancipated from this planet, to be enriched and empowered by that degree so that our souls are enveloped in light energy, and makes it possible, therefore, for us to be lifted from 3D to 4 in time, to 5 and to 6, and ultimately into 7, which is the God's environment. He has to trust us. If you are not trustworthy and reliable, you could really mess things up. You know, I don't think it's going to be possible for us to maneuver backwards in time, because too many bad things would happen. I think we may be able to witness it, but not interact with it backwards. But should somebody try to do so, they could destroy the whole universe. Black holes are dangerous. Neutron stars are dangerous. Everything out there will kill you unless you know what you're doing. I think God's going to allow us to conceive life, but we have to do so responsibly. And so he needs to have someone who will listen, and when we go off with him, who will pay attention and be an interesting explorer who can be relied upon. And this whole experience over this past 6,000 years is to show that that's possible. And the first time it was demonstrated possible was with Noah. He listened to God. He did what God had asked. He worked very hard at his craft, and he saved his family. And in so doing, the metaphors between the 8 of them, which I don't want to go into all the detail here because I have in previous shows, and why 8 of them is so meaningful to us, or why the rainbow was the sign at the end and it was the sign of the covenant is so meaningful to us, or why the people who were wiped out at that time were the Nephilim, which means to fall, those who fall. Talk about the fall of man. The stories are interrelated in this regard, or how the flood was started as God said, with an upwelling of deep sea water. It was the Burkle impact crater, if you want to know where it was, when it happened. And it caused this tsunami of water to rush up all the way through the Mesopotamia up into the Black Sea, which at that time was fresh water, turned to salt water. The water rose 500 feet and then it blew out through the Bosphorus Straits, opening a sea lane from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. That all happened just as God said it would, and that impact crater caused the 40 days of rain that followed. And so it happened exactly when, where, why God said it would. Marvelous story, but we need to know that Noach was the example. Noach even means guide. He was the guide that tells us it is possible to earn God's trust, to engage with him, to listen, to be observant, to pay attention. You got to know that he made a lot of mistakes trying to build that massive boat, but you don't hear him complaining. He got it done. And then, of course, you have Moshe. I didn't want to do this, but he did. He saw it through. Toughest job in the history of humanity, herding Jews throughout the wilderness for 40 years when they were so obnoxious, but he did it. And then, of course, the greatest example in human history is Dowd, the beloved Son of God, the chosen one, our Messiah, King, our Savior. Not only produced some 100 songs and prose in the word pictures of the Mashal for us, but he is the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Makota, making it possible for us to transition from this world to the next without our religious guilt, our lives eternal, us being adopted into God's family, being enriched and empowered by him. So Dowd made it possible for us to make that transition. That was 2,000 years ago when he fulfilled this spring Mikra. But it's the fall Mikra that bring us back into the garden. And that's what this story is all about. That is why we turn to Isaiah, because he is telling us exactly the timing of when these mechanisms will come into fruition. Because we have to first, from God's perspective, we have to first have a harvest of mature grain that's active in the field and stout, standing up, making a difference, being productive, and that they need to be harvested. Katsir is the Yahweh's term, in advance of the worst of the time of Jacob's troubles, so that we are therefore given an invigorating opportunity to become much more effective teachers and witnesses and leaders going forward. And so we're being called out of the world, not to go on vacation, but to go into intensive learning, if you will, and preparation for the job that will be ours going forward. And then come Teruah, it's the greatest show on earth. Everything pivots one way or the other. That's the fulcrum of life on this planet. Those who have listened to the two witnesses and who show the right attitude and aptitude to be purged of the religious and political guilt will benefit from the sacrifice of the Adam Parah, with Eliah being the master of ceremonies, God himself lighting the flames, releasing torrents of water from underneath the Temple Mount to cleanse this mortal remnant of the religious guilt. And as a result of that, God's going to have brought in all of the people that he views could benefit from this into Jerusalem. Everybody else going to be exterminated. Because we're returning to the garden. You can't have conspiratorialists, anti-Semites, religious people, political people, militant people. You can't have any of them. They all have to be expunged. They'll all be gone. And then God's immediately terraforming the earth from its tragic condition that it will be in 7.5 years from now, back into the conditions that were experienced in Eden, the entire planet. And Dod and Yahweh will return king and God on Yom Kippurim in 2033, October 2nd. And we will re-enter the garden on the 7th of October, on Sukkah, where we'll have 1,000 years to work with this mortal remnant who has just been purged of their guilt, who have met Dod for the first time, been introduced to God, of what they're going to have to do to be worthy of leaving this planet. We've got 1,000 years to educate them, to prepare them, to equip them, to lead them, to guide them, to be role models for them, so that we don't make the same mistake as Adam. We show that God can trust us. We show that we're willing to work. We show that we're more than willing to be observant, to listen. When we stumble, we get back up. God's not looking for perfect. Perfect is boring as hell. You see, one of the things about God that most people don't recognize, God cannot be omniscient. He cannot be omnipresent. Those two things would render him meaningless, would render him the dirt itself. And if he was omniscient, then he would know all things and no relationship would be of any interest to him. God is neither of those things. But for God to continue to be infinite, which from our point of view, he is the epitome of the seventh dimension, he must continue to grow. God must grow. If he doesn't grow, he cannot be infinite. And the best way for God to grow is through shared experiences, like we do when we have a family, when we build something of value and work with others to achieve it. And it is by those shared experiences and shared endeavors that God's going to grow. And our job is to assemble a properly prepared and equipped group of humans to make that possible, so that God's eternity is as enjoyable and productive as will be those who are selected for it. And so this is the path to it. And that's why we're now in Yeshaya, Isaiah 17, reading about how this is going to come into fruition. So I guess that's a 33-minute introduction to where we were in our last program. But you see, my job is to explain it. Here's how the next 7 years are going to play out. It's an amazing book that walks you through the prophets. My job is to explain it. My job is to share it with you in a way that pierces right into your soul, that causes you to say, wow, that makes perfect sense. I have never heard that before, but boy, that explains that whole story in a way that's meaningful. We don't have, a woman biting an apple with long hair, handing a bite to a man, and then having God get all upset. It's not what happened at all. It's not why the story is told. And we don't have a man God arrive that men can kill, that is somehow bodily resurrected, that's unrelated to all the story that happened prior. We don't have to go through all of that, nor do we have to have all of the laws and gymnastics of Judaism or the craziness of Islam. It's just God as a father and a relationship that he is inviting us to participate in a manner that he has not only articulated, but demonstrated is feasible. So it's my job. I'm here to tell you that. I'm going to do my job the best I possibly can. Why? Because what God wanted when we began our collaboration is to demonstrate that Dod and Moshe and Noach weren't the only ones who could pass muster, who could be sufficiently devoted to get this job done, to do as God wants, to be a good listener, to go where the words lead, to be observant enough that you could write 35 of these based upon an amplified translation and interpretation of what God had written, and deduce tens of thousands of profoundly important insights that no one had perceived previously. That's my job. But it's only part of my job. The bigger part of the job is to share it with you. How you choose to respond to it, not my responsibility. It is my responsibility to share it with you as completely, as credibly, as compellingly as it is possible. And I hope that there are those among you who are motivated to capitalize on what I'm sharing. I don't get any brownie points if you do or if you don't. My job is to be as committed as is humanly possible to learning and sharing God's story, to explaining to you why you're here and how God has made it possible for you to leave this rock and explore the universe with him. So this is your opportunity. As I say, I hope you are among those who are willing to capitalize upon it. But if you're going to be part of this upcoming Shabuah harvest, you better get your act together. God's not looking for dependence. This isn't, Christianity and 4 spiritual laws. This isn't a profession of faith. You've got to respond based upon what you've come to know, what you've learned. You need to go to yadayah.com and start reading. I'm not charging a nickel for anything. Not looking for a following, not looking for any donations. Books are all free at yadayah.com. Go there, capitalize upon it, learn, then engage doing what we're doing. Make a contribution along with us. There is a very dedicated team that is helping you hear this message, wherever you may be. It's your job to be receptive and respond. That's what God's looking for. And then to engage. All right, so I'm going to go back to Yashaya 17 now that you have a bit more of an understanding of why we're here, because it is Yashaya, the great prophet, Isaiah, who was the one who explained how we go from the man that was booted out of the garden for noncompliance, such that we're either among this mortal remnant that's allowed back into the garden, are far better for you and for God and for Dod, our Savior, and for the prophet Yashaya, that you listen up and that you're part of the Shabuah harvest, because that's the group that's going to be so active in working together with the tree of lives and the tree of knowledge to equip this mortal remnant of Yisrael and prepare a family for father and son, Yahweh and Dod. So he wrote, then, and this is after he has spoken of Israel being thinned at the waist, so that the nation is no longer defensible. So that will be in the immediate proximity to what's called the 2-state solution, or a Palestinian, I even hate to say that word because there's no such thing as a Palestinian, but a Palestinian state being imposed on Israel. And I know Israel is saying, oh, never going to happen. The prophets say, oh, yeah, it is going to happen. And it's going to happen soon, by the way. Absolutely within the next 18 months, possibly within the next 6. I would say I think it's actually likely within the next 6, but absolutely within the next 18. This is going to happen. And the harvest that is being spoken of here, he is responsible for this. He's called a katzir, a reaper of the harvest. He is called a zaroah, the one cultivating the seeds of a productive harvest. And those who are being taken from this world to enter the 7th dimension, to recharge and prepare for what follows, are called kama, which is standing grain. Let me read it to you. then he will actually be, and it will come to exist, that someone who can be compared to the Katsir, the reaper of the harvest. He will be collecting and assembling, the ingathering and withdrawing while escorting, this is Asaph, the Kamah, the standing grain. It is grain, particularly wheat, we're told in the Torah, which is established upright, on the stalk, still in the field, grown, mature. And it's from Kum. Kum means to rise, to be empowered, to persist, to be established, to fulfill your purpose, and to confirm the truth. It's very, very good to be Kamah. It's a lot of responsibility to be Katsir. But when you're harvesting Kamah, you're with the best of all possible people. Then it says, and this Zeroah, so the Katsir, the reaper of this harvest, is a Zeroah. It's a title. He is the one cultivating the seed sown for this harvest to be especially fruitful and productive. It's from the Hebrew verb zara, which has the same meaning. He is presented as the strong arm of God at this point, the influence that God has in planting and cultivating these seeds. It says he will reap the harvest. The Zeroah, who is the Katsir, is going to reap this harvest of the Kamah, the standing grain, from the field, with unfolding implications, even as time is now short and during an anguishing period. Only have 7 years left. From the garden to the garden, 6,000 years. You got 7 years and a few months left. I would say that's on the short end of time, wouldn't you? And we're already knowing, we're experiencing how anguishing this period is for Jews. More anti-Semitism, more attacks on Jews than any time in human history. And the prophets say that it's going to get so bad that 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die. That's how bad this is going to get with anti-Semitic attacks. And it's primarily because there will be an Al-Aqsa flood 2.0 that will be hugely worse than Al-Aqsa flood of October 7th, 23. Time is running short. The time that's called the time of Jacob's troubles, the time of Israel's troubles, it's upon us. It begins in 5 months. It's already bad, but the time of Jacob's troubles begins in 5 months. It runs all the way through Teruah of 2033, 7 years. It's an anguishing period. Time is short. It is the Zeroah's and the Katsir's job to reap this harvest of Kamah, of the standing grain from the field, with unfolding implications as time is cut short. And as we read this in the previous statement, where he is responsible for the ingathering, he is also accompanying the ingathering and is escorting those home, because it can be very different when we come to Teruah, where the same Zeroah, he stays behind on that harvest. More to do. And so this is an anguishing period of Katsir. And it then reads of Shebolim for first fruits, following as a stream of grain. In addition, then, he will actually be such that it will come to exist. That this someone who is comparable to a Lakat. Very similar role, but different. Same man. The one who gleans a final, smaller, more challenging in gathering, is going to rapidly remove what remains. So after this katsir of standing grain, which is Shavua, Torah is very clear of the Shavua harvest being of standing grain. That's Shavua. The same man, 7 years later, is going to be responsible for a lakat. And that means that he's going to be the one who gleans a smaller and more challenging ingathering. And he's going to rapidly remove what remains. A man who takes what's left after the initial harvest, even as the yield diminishes and it's more laborious to pick and collect. And this time, Shabolim again of the first fruits on the stems, off the main branch, appearing out of a torrent of floodwaters, moving as a stream from one place to another in linear fashion. It's a stream of light, and it's going to be very closely timed with the release of floodwaters underneath the Temple Mount, which will purge the mortal remnant that is being brought into Yisrael as this final harvest, this gleaning takes place. And it says this is going to occur in the profound depths of Raphaim, where the sick will be healed and the defective will be restored, while those who are feeble will falter, and the souls of the dead will remain. Yeshaya 17:5. All I can tell you is, since I have been over this passage and detailed every word for you previously, is that that's one of the most profoundly important pronouncements ever made, and it is pertinent to exactly where we are right now. Because this Shavua harvest and this vexing time of trouble will transpire either this next Shavua, the 22nd of May, 2026, which is a Shabbat, or it's going to occur a year later on the 11th of June, also a Shabbat of 2027. Either 5 months or 18 months away. You want to be part of it, and you cannot be part of this at the last minute. There will be no last minute attendees. This is mature, standing grain. No last minute. Oh, well, I'm going to continue to live my life just as I am, and maybe at the very end I'll do something that indicates that I can be trusted. No. You need to be about your choice now. It's a lot to learn. The purpose of the Shavua harvest isn't to take babies and to give them milk. It's to prepare men and women who have proven and demonstrated that they're active learners, that they know what God has offering, what he has communicated to us, and what our responsibilities are. And of course, that second harvest, that gleaning of those who were left is on Teruah 7 years later in 2033. Now, still speaking of the Bashar that was mentioned earlier, the Katsir, which is the harvester, the Lakat, the gleaner, and the Zeroah, the one who is following in the footsteps of Moshe and Dod, is the first two Zeroah, who is preparing this harvest, collecting it, cultivating it. And he will remain. So this is different now, isn't it, on Teruah than it was on Shavua, where he accompanies those being harvested. And this time, he will remain. He will endure being left behind, with the remainder as flesh and blood, having caused people with physical bodies to be spared as a remnant. La Sha'ar. Just one word. Rocked my world. I hope it inspires you. Sha'ar is then in a Washa'ar, would be then in a close relationship. He, speaking of the Zeroah, of the Katsir, will stay behind. His body will serve as a reminder for the remainder of the extended family who are still leavened, a remnant of blood relations left over and remaining as physical beings. Sha'ar means to remain and to be left behind. It is written identically to Sha'or, meaning leavened. Sha'ar being a remnant, a remainder, and the residue. And Sha'ur, physical body, comprised of flesh and blood. A corporeal mass of meat and a blood relative. Niphal, perfect, third person, masculine, singular. Where the subject, who is the Zeroah, who has been cultivating the fruitful harvest and productive gleaning, will carry out and endure the action which is to be left behind while causing others to remain in physical bodies based upon the choices he and they have made. And that concludes with, he will do all of this during the harvest, during Teruah, which is what is being described here. And that's 17:6 of Isaiah in part. Now, only two words in Hebrew, Washa'ar and Bahu. And yet, as I say, they rocked my world. Rendering them correctly brought me back to a conversation that I've shared previously that I had with Yahweh after meeting my wife, Leah. This goes back, I guess 8 years ago. We were concerned over our Labrador puppy. She's right now no longer a puppy. Right here at my feet, she's snoozing as she does during these shows. And her name is Asher. I named her after the first word I translated in Hebrew. And I asked Yahweh if our beloved pet would be coming with us on Teruah. I knew God loves animals, particularly dogs. Koleb was one of his very favorite people. It's the Hebrew word for dog. And God's answer was shocking to me at the time. I didn't understand it. He replied, so where do you think you're going? I had no idea how to process that. Now I do. I'm not going anywhere on Teruah. I'm staying behind because I'm the Teruah sacrifice. I am the Adam of Parah. So now I know the reason for his answer. Nowhere. Nowhere and everywhere. I will not be joining the covenant members gleaned on Friday evening, the 23rd of September, 2033. Instead, I will Sha'ar. I will remain behind as flesh and blood. As the sun rises on the Shabbat of Teruah, the 24th of September, 2033, year 6000 Yah, going to be the most extraordinary 24 hours in human history from that evening, what happens that night, and then on this magnificent day. I will continue to serve those left behind, the very people I've had the honor to spare and protect during the gleaning so that they're available for the great purge late this morning. On the day of the herald, the Bashar body of the Bashar herald will be sacrificed as the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is a fruitful and productive bull, preparing the mortal remnant of Yisrael for Dod's return on Kippurim with Yahweh and for the reentry to the garden on Sukkah. The Katsir and the Zeroah will not accompany the ingathering, nor will Eliah, who is the other witness at this time, along with Yada. This, as I have mentioned, will be the greatest show on earth. And we both have roles to perform. As the final gleaning is underway, our job this night will be to gain the attention and then protect every remaining Yisraelite in Jerusalem with the potential to be purged of religious residue. And all the while, Yahweh is going to be releasing 4 chariots from Shamaim, 4 means of conveyance, And one of them, Elia and I are aboard. It's the red one. That's the purpose is to gather every Israelite in Jerusalem that has the potential to benefit from this sacrifice. They're not overtly religious or political, certainly not conspiratorial or anti-Semitic. All the while, the other three will be going about their business all around the world that night. The black chariot's the one you don't want to be on, but if you're dressed in black as a religious Jew, you're in trouble because your souls will be taken and all the way into incarceration and Sheol. There is then the white chariot. Pretty cool to be on that one. That means that you are a Yehud from somewhere on earth. God's named the places that he's going to bring you home. That means that you have been determined to have the disposition, attitude, aptitude, such that there is the potential for you to benefit from this sacrifice of the Adam Parah and witness Dod's return and enter Eden. So that potential is extraordinarily important, and I hope that you're among those who will have that opportunity. And then there is the dappled conveyance, and it's to accumulate Goyim, Gentiles, who are not overtly religious, overtly political, overtly conspiratorial, not anti-Semitic, who have, again, aptitudes and attitudes that are conducive to the work that will be done in our return to Gan Eden. And they will be brought also. And then, well, from that point on, things get really, really interesting. So as we gather everyone who might benefit from the cure, we will be continuing to communicate to everyone gathered in Jerusalem. It's going to be an extraordinary time. We're going to talk God's people out of harm's way until morning. And we know what's going to happen now on the black chariot that will haul away the overtly religious. The white conveyance will be next and bring in a world of Israelites and Yehudim who are not overtly religious. And they will be brought into Jerusalem, which is now being protected, and soon they'll be purged and prepared by the bull sacrifice later this morning. And finally, the dappled chariot will search the planet to find and gather Goyim, who will serve in the garden, Kamsuka. Now, once these spiritual vehicles have concluded their mission, Yahweh will scorch the earth, incinerating all traces of religion and the religious, militants, militaries, the overtly political, and the conspiratorial. They'll all go. Once that is complete, he will transform the earth such that it resembles the condition in Eden. These transformational events will be ongoing during the Shabbat of Teruah as Elia summons the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan and his minions to slay the Adam Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is this productive bull. Doing so for all to see on a Temple Mount that has already seen the Dome of the Rock and Alaska Mosque purged, removed, destroyed. The Temple Mount itself brought back to pristine conditions, and God is going to erect a tent of the restoring witness there. He will have brought in back the Ark of the Covenant with its Kaporeth, its mercy seat. The 2 tablets of stone will be there. An original copy of the Torah will be there as well. And then at that moment, Elia is going to summon the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan. This will be his last act. And my body as the Adam Parah will be beaten to death, which is why Sha'ar was selected to tell us that the sacrifice is being left behind as a remainder, as flesh and blood. And on behalf of this Sha'ar, this mortal remnant with physical bodies, they're going to benefit from this sacrifice. It's going to be Numbers 19 meshed with Numbers 5. So in that this sacrifice is of the Bashar, this human herald, the Katsir, the reaper of the harvest, and the Zeroah, this man cultivating a productive harvest. And he's clearly a man, as is the Adamah Parah. I was surprised knowing that, well, I was going to be beaten to death by Satan. I had not anticipated that. And that's going to happen for all to see. And then when I saw the prophet use parah, productive bull, in the very next sentence in association with the Yehudim and Yisraelites being left behind and protected by this Zeroah, the magnitude of the moment became pregnant. Yahweh was explaining how, when, where, and why. The Adamah Parah of Numbers 19 would resolve the guilt associated with Dod's bride of Bamidbar 5. The whole picture comes together. That is our future. So do you wish to participate? So in Sha'ar, it's all there. He, speaking of the Zeroah, will be staying behind. He will remain, enduring being left behind with the remainder as flesh and blood, for having caused people with physical bodies to be spared as a remnant. He is engaged in a close relationship, serving as a reminder for the remainder of the extended family who are still leavened as physical beings. And in the Niphal perfect, third person, masculine singular, this means that this Zeroah, who has been cultivating the fruitful harvest and productive gleaning, is going to carry out and endure this whole process of those who are left behind and being left behind, while causing others to remain in physical bodies based upon the choices he and they have made. And by concluding the prophetic pronouncement with Bahu, the final Zeroah and the Katsir will serve the mortal remnant of Yisrael throughout the whole of Teruah. So as we consider what comes next, it is helpful to know that Oliyah, immature fruit, describes those who don't yet know Yahweh or realize all Dod has achieved, but who still possess the potential, given the opportunity, to mature and grow. Those who are left represent the mortal remnant who have survived the time of Israel's troubles and who are now gathered around the Temple Mount to listen to Elia and Yada. And since they were harvested or unharvestable because they were not properly mature, this means that they missed the Teruah Lakat because they had not accepted the terms and conditions of the Bereth covenant or availed themselves of the Moedim, the restoring witnesses, being Olilah, infantile, and still a bit capricious. They were set aside, and they will be given time to grow up and mature. Yashaya chose Ka Nokesh Zayet to reveal an important association between the beating of this olive tree and the choder stem and branch, who is the Zeroah, who will be lashing away in order to dissuade Jews from clinging to Judaism. Let go! It's particularly clever because branches were actually used to strike the trees to dislodge the last of the fruit. It was the prescribed method of harvesting olives. And in this case, since Yashaya revealed that the choder is Etzah and Dayath, providing the counsel of the tree of knowledge, he is trying to garner the attention of these remaining Israelites so that they might learn enough to let go. Let God take it from here. Shanaim in this passage is a dual noun, and it's also a number, which is most commonly rendered as two, but it can also convey a pair, both, or a double portion, even twice or a second time. There was no wa used to connect Shanaim and Shalosh, three or third. Therefore, while I've rendered the phrase two or three, the other options are pairs of three, an additional time for three, or a double portion for a third. And either way, all these ways, it's likely addressing some multiple of these numerals as we consider the full implications. Gargar is a bit of a challenge, of course, since it only appears this once in the Torah, the Nabeim and Wa-Mizmor, making it subject to interpretation. Based upon this context pertaining to the olive tree, it is typically rendered as olive berry. However, on 4 occasions, Garar becomes Garorth, which in this regard is used to speak of one's neck. Solomon uses Gargoth in this regard in his first Mashal proverb, stating that the instruction and teaching are wreaths for one's head and ornamentation for one's neck, Gargoth. In Proverbs 3, which I assume would be from Dode, he encourages us to persist with kindness and truth, such that they are bound around our Gargoth neck. And he states that intelligence and discernment should adorn our Gargoth throats. There's also the possibility that Gargar is an emphatic duplication of Garar, to be caught and taken away. Lastly, with 2 letters in common, it may also be influenced by the verbal root gara, which is to restrain, abate, keep back, diminish, and withdraw. I'm going over all of these words because it's essential that we understand the essence of what the prophet Isaiah was communicating on behalf of Yahweh. Yahweh has been the speaker. He continues to be the speaker. God is very bright. He can communicate on many levels simultaneously. The Hebrew language is rich in symbolism. And so that's why I'm going into such detail here. This statement in Yeshaya 17 is the very foundation upon which the fulcrum of who will have the opportunity to come back into the garden and who will not, and who will be there to serve those who are given this opportunity. It's all laid out here, the timing of it, a complete understanding of who the players are and what they're offering and what God is achieving in his overall timeline is right here. So it's really important that we consider the full implications of every one of these words. And I want to open them up to you, knowing that you're receptive to learning so that you can participate in this process and make conclusions on your own. Now, it speaks of Rosh, which means top, most crucial, foremost, and uppermost. And this would be Yehudim differentiated from Yisrael in this context. They are the beloved of Yah. It is to distinguish the tribe of Dod from the part of the family that was fractured and cut away long ago, 2,700 years ago, by the Assyrians. Amir is from Amar. It means to talk. So it's a talkative branch. Now, this is to suggest that the Choder is somewhat verbose. Well, because he has a lot to say. And I hear you all chuckling out there. Stop that. Just kidding. With these concepts now thoughtfully introduced, let's proceed with the translation itself and consider the potential implications of the concluding phrase once we have rendered it all. It begins, olel ah, immature fruit, thrust aside and left on the stems and branches. The unharvested, forcefully pushed away because it's too young, and it is purposely remaining on the vine or the branches by the reaper from alal to be diverted and set aside as a result, of being juvenile, still capricious. As would be the case when an olive tree is beaten from all around to shake off some of the fruit. Now, be really careful here. This is an olive tree, which means that all of this that is transpiring on Teruah here is pursuant to Yisrael and Yehudim. They are the olives. They're wheats of Shabuah, Goyim, and Yehudim, and Israelites. This is an olive. We're dealing with Israelites now and Yehudim. So immature fruit thrust aside and left on the stems and branches, as would be the case when an olive tree is beaten from all around to shake off some of the fruit. 2 or 3, a pair, both, a double portion. Removed olive berries held back by the neck and taken away. Removed and crushed fruit from Gerar to be caught and taken away, to have been held back and restrained by the throat. And the top, most crucial, and foremost, the uppermost, choicest, vocal branch who speaks, promises, and relates, Amir, the highest stem from the summit, from Amar, to speak and relate, symbolic of both Dod and also of his Choder, and they have a lot to say. 4 or 5, Arba, Shemesh, in the clefts of his crag, from his branches which have been broken off, in crevices, fissures, and cracks, in a crag from secondary branches which were lopped off and separated from the trunk of the tree. Of the parah, the fruitful and productive bull, the one cultivating and flourishing an abundant harvest on behalf of future generations. All of this is in Yahweh's voice because it is Neam Yahweh, prophetically declares Yahweh, God of Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with the Almighty. Yahweh delivers Isaiah 17:6. Now, we've already drawn this program to the hour and 15-minute timeline. And I've done a lot to introduce this, and then I've read it to you. And we're not going to be able to expand on every nuance of it, but I do want to share with you key aspects of it, even after having covered every possible word. Before we go, and we may pick up at this point in our next program. Yahweh's fond of repetition. He's very fond of repetition. God's style of teaching is he tells us what he's going to tell us. He then tells us, and then he reminds us of what he has told us. I like his style. So immature fruit thrust aside and left on the stems and branches. These are the olives representing the Israelites who were not ready, not prepared for that final gleaning on Teruah the evening before. And this is the case with an olive tree that's beaten from all around. That's the way they were gleaned at the end, trying to shake off some of the fruit, which is to beat it with a stem, which is what the choder is, a stem. And we don't know if it's 2 or 3 that are removed from the olive berries that have been held back, taken by the throat, if you will, and taken away. The jugular, if you could say that as well, keeping them from spewing out nonsense that would exclude them from this process? Or this is just a second time of where a third are gleaned? All those are possible. But these olive berries are going to be in this position at this moment. This is Israelites and Jews. And you'll find them, this initial group, in the top, critical, crucial, and foremost of this very vocal branch. And that is because we're speaking of Yehudim as opposed to those who are cut away, that would be Israelites. And it says 4-5. In the clefts of his crag. My name is from the Celtic word meaning crag, Greg. It's descriptive of the same individual. These have been broken off. This will be Israelites. Parah is the Hebrew word not only for productive and beneficial, but it is bull from par. And he is the one who is cultivating this harvest, this now part of this process on behalf of future generations, because we've now gone from the Katsir for Shavuot to the Lakot of Teruah, always operating as the Zeroah, cultivating the harvest, who is now the Parah, this fruitful and productive bull. He is the Anima Parah. And we have this prophetically delivered by Yahweh himself, who I think can be trusted in this regard. So during the evening of September 23rd, 2033, after the Teruah gleaning, there will be an Ole La, a time whereby Yehudim and Israelites still clinging to the tree will be shaken and taken aside and then protected. And while I initially perceived that these olives represented those heaven-bound in the sunset Lakot the evening before, I now see them as the mortal remnant that's left behind. But either way, there will be a multiple of 7, 2 plus 3 and 4 plus 5, of 7 Yehudim and Israelite souls preserved, whether that be 70, 700, 7,000, or 70,000. Again, it doesn't matter, because it is quality over quantity. We're being entrusted with so much. Therefore, in addition to whatever number of olives gleaned, there will be others set aside and left on the branches, and they will not be part of the Lakot, but will be available to be purged of their residual guilt. And since this was prefaced by Sha'ar, we know that they will remain in physical bodies, while the Zeroah will be reduced to flesh and blood as the sun rises and the full light of Teruah becomes evident. Sound the shofar. But more on this in a moment. Now, continuing to probe the full implications of every word, Arba is 4, fourfold, or fourth, square, or 25%. And Shemesh is 5, fivefold, fifth, 20%, or in some cases, even stomach. Therefore, this could be a multiplier of 4, 5, 20%, or 25%, or an indication that this represents a fourth and fifth iteration of this process. My initial inclination is to affirm that 2 plus 5 equals 7 and 3 plus 4 equals 7, suggesting that there will be a multiple of 7, 70, 700, or 7,000 purged on Teruah, with Yehudim being outnumbered by Israelites. And that would be by approximately 2 to 1. Yet another possibility with these numbers is that Yehudim will benefit the most from the Moedim and 3, Matzah and the 3, which is the Moedim 2 and 3, which are Matzah and Bekudim, while Israelites will capitalize upon Mikra 4 and 5. So Mikra 2 and 3, Matzah Makotim, you're purged of your religious guilt, you become children of God. Why Israelites will capitalize upon Mikra 4 and 5, which are Shavua and Teruah, as they were found having after they had been lost. By Sha'if, Hugh denotes Israelites as opposed to Yehudim. They were Sharif lopped off and cut away 2,700 years ago, but are now found in the Sha'if clefts of the rocks by the Sha'if crag, who is now the secondary branch of the tree. Therefore, Ba Sha'if suggests that the Israelites are being given a second chance to be grafted back into the tree of lives via secondary stem, i.e., this case, the choder through the tree of knowledge. Now, in this light, and as previously noted, Amir is a play on words. Yahweh through Yashayah is affirming the obvious. Yada is loquacious. He is talkative, a bit boisterous. But he is also a crag with the cracks and crevices to show his age and the battle scars earned along the way. And while we have known that the Zeroah is fruitful as a result of the actionable root of this title being Zerah, sowing seeds, this is the first time that the one cultivating the Moedim as the Katsir has been identified as a Parah, productive bull. And of that, there are some extraordinary implications, which is why we are here in our return to the garden en route to Numbers 19 and the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. Now, since Yahweh called his final Zeroah an Amir, talkative stick, it is germane to this conversation to reveal that Par Bull was written Perosh. These letters are found among the six in the Hebrew, the final six, I should say, in the Hebrew alphabet. And they mean that this come lately will be a man known for his head and his mouth. Yahweh's Par listens, observes, thinks, and then speaks. That is why he is the Kol, voice of God. It is also insightful to reveal that Parah, the productive one, is scribed when it has the hey ending. It's Pe Rosh Hey, which is presented as the mouth, the head, and the person standing upright in the original script of the Torah. This affirms that the bull with the big head and mouth, well, he's human. The productive one pursuing the harvest is an exceptionally vocal, observant, and thoughtful man who takes a stand to point the way to God. In his final act in this role, he is dubbed the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is a productive bull, which is perceived by many to be the red heifer in Bamidbar, Numbers 19. So as the case with many words sharing the par root of bull, para is identified as to expose, to dismiss, to uncover, and then to absolve. This is relevant because the Adamah Parah's ensuing sacrifice on Teruah on behalf of those left behind is to unbind and discharge with payment remitted to overlook the penalty that would otherwise be incurred. Foreshadowing what the bull will endure as we consider this ordeal in the fourth book of the Torah, Parah speaks of bearing the skin and smashing away at it to provide compensation. He's going to be beaten to death. Describing the nature of those bludgeoning the man in the guise of the bull to death, Parah reveals that an unrestrained man or unrestrained mob will be attacked by a man and that they're going to be out of control. The related Peretz and Perek speak of the Choder's adversary, Hasatan, a savage and cruel creature who is violent and ravenous as a thief, devoted to death and destruction in the most ruthless, barbaric, and brutal manner. He is a rapturous and ferocious robber. Of Satan's minions, Perha says that they are a brood of brats and swarming rabble, chaotic and violent youths. Then addressing the Perah's positive traits, Perah is used to describe a shoot or stem like the Choder, which bears fruit, like the tree of knowledge, and of a leader who provides freedom. This is, in this regard, the related Pare depicts a fruitful harvest, producing young offspring consistent with Zeroah. This may be why Perah is defined as a bud which blossoms, addressing that which will happen when the Zeroah's nephesh soul succeeds in this regard. In the waning hours of Teruah, Perah, the soul, will fly away, making a linear motion through the air to Shamayim as his body is incinerated, along with Yisrael's guilt. So in all of this, we are witnessing why Par Bol becomes so much more as Perah, just as the case with Etz tree and Etzah counsel on the entire picture, and Adam, man, as Adamah, bloody red man of the earth. Para, which means to release, to let go, to cast off, totally emancipated in this context, would be reminiscent of let my people go. It reveals an invitation to another Yatsa, Exodus, this one from Babylon, courtesy of Yahweh's Perah. And in this context, it's interesting to note that a Peraz is a prince who governs. He is the fighter who defends. When spelled with an Aleph rather than an Ain, Para means to thrive in fullness. This is germane because the Perah, he is King Dod's herald, a prince to the king. And while the tertiary definition of Perah is deduced from the feminine suffix added to Par Bol, the actual meaning of the word is to be productive and fruitful, cultivating offspring through an abundant harvest. To Perah is to cause others to sprout and blossom, flourish, and grow, for them to thrive and mature. It's a noble ambition. And should anyone think that the Perah productive and fruitful bowl was inadequate by itself to equate these events of Yom Teruah, of the herald, this day of the herald, with the prophetic portrayal of the Adam of Perah, the bloody red man and productive bull in Bamidbar, Numbers 19, well, perhaps Yeshaya's next pronouncement will be sufficient, especially when considered as part of this prophecy. And the context it reads, then he will actually be, and it will come to exist, that someone who can be compared to the Katsir, this harvester, will be collecting and assembling the ingathering and withdrawing while escorting the Kamah, the standing grain, which is established and ready to rise. And this Zeroah, one cultivating the seeds sown for this harvest to be fruitful and productive, he will reap the ingathering from the field with unfolding implication, even as time runs short during an anguishing period for the first fruits flowing as a stream of grain. In addition, then, he will actually be someone consistent with a Lakat, one who gleans the final, the smaller, and the more challenging ingathering, rapidly removing what remains of the fruit on the stems off the main branch, peering out of a torrent of floodwaters, moving as a stream from one place to another. In the profound depths of Raphaim, where the sick will be healed and the defective will be restored, while the feeble will falter and the souls of the dead will remain. And he will remain enduring, being left behind with this remainder as flesh and blood, for having caused people with a physical body to be spared as a remnant during this process. Immature fruit thrust aside and left on the stems and branches, as would be the case when an olive tree is beaten from all around to shake off some of the fruit. 2 or 3 or a second and third time, removed olive berries held back by the neck and taken away in the topmost crucial and foremost vocal branch, who speaks, promises, and relates. 4 or 5 on the 4th and 5th in the clefts of his crag, from his branches which have been broken off, of the parah, this fruitful and productive bull, the one cultivating a flourishing and abundant harvest on behalf of future generations, productively and prophetically declares Yahweh, the God of Yisrael, of individuals who engage and endure with the Almighty. So therefore, according to Yahweh, a man will arrive who is comparable to a katsir, a harvester, collecting, withdrawing, and escorting the kamah, standing grain, which has been established and matured. This Zeroah, one cultivating this productive harvest, will gather it in from the field as time runs short during a vexing period as a flowing stream of grain. Then, in addition, he will serve as a lakat, one who gleans a final, more challenging in gathering, rapidly removing the fruit as a torrent of floodwaters suddenly appear, thereby curing and restoring the infirmed. He will remain behind as flesh and blood, and while enabling a mortal remnant, I should say, now considered too immature as fruit to have been harvested, so they're set aside as they're whacked off this olive tree a second and third time by the most crucial of stems and this vocal branch. A 4th or 5th attempt will leave them in the crags and the branches of the parah, of the productive bull. And then we learn that the kasir, the lakat, the zeroah, and the parah is a particularly observant man, focused upon Yahweh, who is the one delivering this result. In that day, this man, Adam, he will be particularly observant, actually and consistently paying attention, highly regarded, and he will accept. He will shalah. He will look favorably toward and respond appropriately to the Almighty. Asha Hu, his maker, the one who will engage and act with him to get this done. And his eyes, they will choose to continually look to the Kadosh, set apart one of Yisrael. Well, I'm going to leave you with that, because we're going to return to this when we resume from our library studio, because that too is profound. We have been given such marvelous instruction by God of exactly what we're going to expect going forward, and we've unveiled it so that you can capitalize upon it. And that is why we deliver the Yahweh blog. Good night.